Hello, and help me welcome Senator Lou D'Alessandro. Lou, welcome aboard.
Well, thank you very much.
This
Thank you.
book of yours is very interesting.
Well,
I
thank you.
read it, and it's a wonderful list of all the things you've done in how many years?
Well, it's been a long time. My my public service began in 1972
Uh-huh,
when I ran for the House of Representatives. I
right.
I was elected to the House, served on the Committee on Education, and in '74 I ran for the Constitutional Convention, and I ran for the Executive Council. So that began guess a series of elections that
I guess so. A series of
kept going.
everything.
Yeah, kept going. And at the same time, I was a coach, a
Yeah.
teacher, and a coach,
Hmm.
and I became president of Daniel Webster College down here
Right.
in Nashua. And Warren Rudman was chairman of the board, and Jim Tamposi, of course, was on the
Uh-huh.
board along with a number of other very prominent Nashua people. And that was a great experience. I My first real management situation in managing a post-secondary education institution. But I had got my training at New Hampshire College, where I was the athletic director and the basketball coach. I became the director of admissions and gravitated into that job in Nashua. But I really had a wonderful time here in Nashua.
Hmm.
I'll
Hmm.
tell you that. I
Hmm.
enjoyed my time here in Nashua very much. Working with Warren was really something special. He had at that time was running for the United States Senate. He was the Attorney General of the state of New Hampshire, and
Hmm.
remarkable guy in many, many ways. So I had a good experience there, good learning experience. And my first venture into aviation,
Oh.
Bois Field, and the big thing was to get that tower manned.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
we worked very hard with the FAA to get that done. So uh, as I said, I've had a lot of time here in Nashua, and when I was vice president of Franklin Pierce University, my office was here in Nashua.
Oh, really? I didn't
Yes,
know that.
yeah, in
Oh.
Nashua, and in the Stabile
Uh-huh.
building
Uh-huh.
on right off, Amherst Street, 101 West, and that was I mean, that was a great experience. Working with Walter Peterson was a wonderful experience, and politically, of course, my career had its ups and downs, as most political careers do. But I was on the executive council when I was here at Daniel Webster College, and it was quite an experience.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, I hope something happens to that property over there.
Yes,
It's a shame that
it's
it's
a
not
terrible
being
shame.
used. Yeah,
A terrible shame. It's a very valuable piece of
that's right.
property. Those buildings were in pretty good shape
Uh-huh.
when they closed the institution. I kind of thought that Southern New Hampshire University would buy the whole thing and put a branch in down here. That didn't
I
work
think
out.
there was too much cost that they thought they would incur.
Yeah,
I mean,
probably.
they bought some of the stuff that's in the airfield,
Yes.
and they have a course that they're doing, and they're trying to
Uh,
find some way of bringing in flying
yes.
instructions again too.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think it would be nice if we could do something
Oh
like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Well, it's a beautiful site,
Hmm.
very attractive site,
Hmm.
and lovely buildings. That was a beautiful library,
Hmm.
and Daniel Webster Hall, which was the
Hmm.
centerpiece.
Hmm.
And then you had the Marty Richmond building.
Hmm.
When I was there, I actually built a couple of buildings. We
No.
we built the Mario Vaggi
Hmm.
Gymnasium
Hmm.
because it was an empty building when I got there, and our goal was to build it out
Hmm.
and make it available for the students. And we did do that, and had a lot of help, obviously, from the people on the periphery, but it was a great experience, I can tell you. I shoveled the roofs off when it snowed. Uh, I
Yeah.
painted the walls inside of some of those buildings, and it was a tough time making that go.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah,
I read that in your book,
yeah,
and that one of the things you had so many things that happened to you.
yes, yeah, yeah.
I was thinking, how does he pick what do you remember the best? Maybe I should ask you, or what several things do you remember best?
Well, I think as a child growing up, it's funny that you mention that because one of the things that's very vivid in my memory is my uncle taking me to the military parades, and I'd sit on the curbstone, I'd sit on the corner, and watch the troops march by. And this was, just at the end of World War II, where the greatest generation was from. And I can remember going to the train yard and seeing the flat cars with the tanks and vehicles on them, and they were being shipped out from the port of Boston to go overseas. And thinking, what's all this about? I mean, really too young to recognize the fact that there was a global war going on, yet realizing, why is all this happening? Why is all this activity? Why are all these soldiers around? Why is everybody moving, in one direction? So that's a memory that I have to this day. And again, it was brought to mind because of the 75th anniversary of the invasion in Normandy. And recognizing that when I was a youngster, a little kid, ration stamps to buy food. And again, I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and my mother would send me to the corner store with the stamps, to buy things. And at home in the evening, we lived on in a 3-decker for a while, and then that house burnt down, so we moved to a two-family home. But closing all the shades in the evening because it was a war zone, really.
Right.
And
Drills.
and the family would congregate in the living room with relatives and visitors, and you'd listen to the radio and listen to the news on the radio. And when I think of it, it was 75 years ago,
Yeah.
and I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and those things come back like magic, to be honest with you. And then you realize how fast time flies. And as we move up the scale, it moves so much faster. But little things happened in my life that were so important. And in the book, I think we tell the story of the fire in my home. We lived on the 3rd story of a 3-family home on Gladstone Street in East Boston, Massachusetts. And a person on the 1st floor was either smoking in bed or discarded a cigarette. The house went up in flames. I can remember firemen coming to the 3rd floor, grabbing our family and taking them down the steps and getting us out into the street. And I remember the hoses across the street and the fire engines. And at that time, it was my mother, my father, and 3 boys, my older brother Richard, myself, and my brother Paul. And we had 2 of my mother's sisters living with us, and probably an uncle. So it was a crowded home, in that 3rd floor apartment. But we all got out safely, and the house burnt to the ground, and we lost everything. Think of that in terms of a catastrophe, like things are going on in country in the Midwest because of the floods. But we had no clothes. We had no place to go. My dad was in the plumbing and heating business. He lost all of his tools. So we had to start from scratch with absolutely nothing. We were placed in different homes because no one could take all of us. My older brother went here, I went here, my younger brother went here, and the family went this way. Then my dad bought another home on Barnes Avenue, and the family all came back together, but there wasn't any room. So the great adventure was a dormer was put on the house. And I had an uncle who was a carpenter, and he built the dormer. And the dormer was to create bedrooms on the 2nd floor was extended out.
I see.
So we had 2 or 3 bedrooms that were created for my aunt, my uncle, and my brother Richard, my brother Paul, and myself, because there were 2 bedrooms downstairs, and my mother and father had one, and I think my grandmother was living with us at the time. So it was it was an interesting experience.
Yeah.
And when you think of it, in today's world, the families don't get together like that.
Unfortunately.
Very unfortunately. but it was a real base upon which to start. And from the for another context, we went to St. Lazarus Grammar School, and we would walk to St. Lazarus on the roadbed of the old narrow gauge railroad, which now is the MTA.
Ah,
So we would walk down that roadbed, and we would walk across town, really, to St. Lazarus School. St. Lazarus was run by the Samaskin Fathers and the Sisters of St. Joseph, which was the local diocesan order. But it was very interesting, and I just found this out as later time went on. The Samaskins were from Italy, so the church wasn't part of the diocese. The church was owned by the Italian order and maintained by the Italian order. So when they started closing all of these churches around the greater Boston area, they couldn't close that one because they didn't own it. So again, a great experience. But one of the I guess the most interesting is who thought that these Italian American kids from a big family were ever going to succeed?
right.
And everybody thought we were going to be at the end of our game, maybe graduate from the 8th grade or something of that nature. But had a strong mother, a strong father, and was able to progress. And education played a pretty significant role in that.
And
A big
sports
role.
played a big part.
Sports
in your
played a very big
education.
role in my life. Yes, I had an older brother who was a magnificent athlete. He set the stage. I followed him, and I had a younger brother that followed me, and another brother that followed him, and we were successful. We were successful. But I think one of the reasons that we were successful was because we were tough, and you had to battle it out because people had no belief in you. Both.
But you had belief in yourself.
Yeah, belief in yourself. And from an intellectual standpoint, many people said, "Oh, well, they're not going any place. They're not moving in the right direction." But yeah, we fooled them. And one of my aunts said that to me in later life. Boy, we thought you were going to go wayward. But
It's nice you said.
well, and it didn't turn out that way. And as I said, I've been very fortunate. Many people have played a significant role in my life. But as you say, athletics played a significant role. I was able to attend a prep school, Worcester Academy. It was a scholarship situation. I worked in the kitchen. I washed dishes. And of course, I played, and I played with some very outstanding players. And as a result of that, I got a scholarship to go to college, and everything worked out. But the thing that people don't realize is the prejudicial nature of the world as you were growing up. I mean, we're at a point in our lives where we say, "Gee, that's all gone," and so forth and so on. But it wasn't gone when I was growing up, and I think of the situation, the racist situation in Boston and so forth. But the prejudice against the Italian American kids who were considered a little bit less than right, and you fought through those things and overcame those things, and I think they made you a stronger person, and you could have gone one way or the other, because some people are affected by that and they turn to aberrant behavior. Other people learn from it and make themselves better and work harder. And I was the beneficiary of a lot of people who were really helpful and cared about my well-being. And my mother passed away when I was very, very young, and went through a difficult time after that. But it is what it is.
Well, I noticed one thing that you sort of said in the book was that you think the morality is changing.
Yes.
And could you say something about that? I mean, because I think I understood what you meant, but I wasn't sure.
Well, I think the whole world is different today, as we've said, or I've said it, and I repeat that quite often. But the morality in this context, a person gave you their word in those days, they stood by it. It was a moral issue, and you could take it to the bank. I don't think you can do that today. I think there's a little bit of a problem there. When a person said they were going to help you,
Yeah.
they meant it.
Right.
They were concerned. They were going to help you, and they were there when they were there to help you. When you needed something, you could go to a person and ask, and they would either tell you they could do it or they couldn't
You
do
could
it.
trust people
You could
more.
trust people.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the biggest thing that's missing today, and again, in my opinion, is that level of trust. And I've seen that dissipate as my life has gone on.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. I've seen some of that up
Yeah,
there in
and-
Concord.
Well, in Concord, it really it shows.
Yeah,
It does.
yeah.
When I first started in this business, Walter Peterson was the governor. Uh, there wasn't a more honorable man in the country, really. He was honorable, he was caring, he tried to help everybody. If Walter gave you his word, take it to the bank. And I really grew under his tenure and under his leadership. When I was president of Daniel Webster, he became president of Franklin Pierce. So we had a relationship, and that went back to the politics of the early '70s when Walter was governor and when he lost in the primary to Mel Thompson. He started another career in education, and as I said, we had a good relationship, a really good relationship. He liked sports. I was a coach. He came to our games, and we had a common bond.
You do bring up several examples of people you could trust throughout
Yes.
the book, and
Yes.
they helped. They were there for you.
Right, they were there,
And,
and you know, one person who was really there for me was Governor Hugh Gallen. I was on the council when he became governor. Served 2 years on the executive council, ended my term there, and then I ran for governor. Ran in a very interesting race with John Sununu, Robert Monier, myself, and a cast of thousands, and it was.
Well, that was sort of a turning time for
It
you
was,
too.
yeah, right.
That's when you became a
Democrat. Yeah, I learned a lot of lessons at
And
that time.
you said that the Republicans went too far to the right.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and went to the right and really cast me aside.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to play any kind of a role in Republican politics.
But you always wanted to help people.
Yes.
That was your
Yeah.
main thesis, and
Yeah.
you really wanted people to help themselves too.
Try. If you help them, they will help themselves.
Yeah.
You know, you give them that hand up. Not you know the old thing, not a hand out, but a hand up. And yeah, and I think I as I said, I learned from my father who helped people. Certainly, my mother was always helping people. My grandmother was always helping people. So it was pervasive throughout our family. My father's sisters were wonderful people in terms of helping others. You know, I would bring a kid home from school with me, and they would feed them and take them. They're always welcome at the dinner table, even when I was a little kid. And my mother would take people really off the street and feed them. Now, in those days, and I'm talking about many years ago, that was a common practice. People used to solicit. They used to sell door to door with their bags, the shopping bags full of material. And they'd come, and the bag lady would come to the house. My mother would have the bag lady come in, sit down, feed her, and buy her wares.
Right.
And I mean, can you imagine that happening today?
Not today, but I know that because I had a mother who did somewhat
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah.
She, a lot of, I had 3 sisters,
Yeah.
and they all had friends who had some problems.
Yeah,
And
sure.
but she was always welcoming them in there,
Yeah.
and sometimes one was even living there with us for a while.
Well,
But you know, if you don't mind sliding a little bit into today's
Oh, sure.
political world,
Oh, of course.
you have now the Democrats that have some people going a little further left
Yes.
than you'd
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. I think so.
And
Yeah.
how do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's something that I have to deal with. I'm a moderate,
Uh-huh.
a centrist, and I think they are going too far to the left.
Yeah.
There's no question in my mind. And you can't give everything away.
That's right.
People have to earn it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
if you go this far to the left and you go this far to the right, there's nobody left in the middle. And I think that's the space that I occupy
Yeah,
at this
yeah.
point. And I try to bring people together.
Together.
Try to bring them to the middle. But that's not easy in today's world,
No.
because I think people have not grown up in the system.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't gone through the chairs,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to be president. What's the
yeah.
first job you want? President. well, what about labor? What about this? What about this? What about this? Okay, you want to be general of the army? Well, can't you be a private first?
Yeah,
And work.
yeah.
So I think there's an imperative. They're so impetuous, and that's a problem because no one wants to go through the learning curve.
Is it their desire to help people, or is it the desire to have the control over people?
Well,
Because that's what I always
yeah.
look at it as.
Yeah.
I think New Hampshire is a state that likes to depend. That people like to have choice. They like
Yeah.
to have ability to do things, but not being told what to do things all
Well,
the
I
time.
think that in New Hampshire, people like to have an option,
Yeah.
and options present themselves. But in the new world, it's my way or the highway, and that causes friction, causes the consternation that we see in our national legislature, and we see examples of
Right.
it in our state legislature. But the idea of bringing people together to solve problems. When I was president of Daniel Webster, a woman by the name of Marion Lacker was my secretary. And Marion Lacker's mantra was, life is a series of problem-solving exercises. So the idea was to get to the problem and solve the problem.
Right.
And you do it in the best possible way you can. I think people are very impetuous. They want to take the easy route. And there is no easy route.
No.
Nothing is easy.
No. No.
Nothing is easy.
Well, you're going to be playing a little role in trying to bring the two sides together.
Well,
in
I hope
this,
so.
Because we're going to have an interesting June, I think, up there.
I think so. We passed the budget in the Senate last night. House has passed its budget. We're going to go to conference. I've been talking with the governor. I've had interactions with the governor right through this whole process, understand where he's coming from. And I have great respect for him. He's a young man. I think he's a good family guy. He has certain ideals, and we have to respect those. But I think he has to also respect where we're coming from as a legislature. But I think the most important thing is we all want to help people.
Right, yeah.
And I said on the floor of the Senate, a budget is an example of value. And the budget truly represents what we value, what our values are. And our values should be to make life better for those people around us.
Right, right.
And if that's our goal, and if that's a common goal, we can get there.
But
We
how
better
do
get there.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I think that's where you have
That's
to have
it.
the discussions.
Yes.
A little bit here, a little
Right,
bit there.
right, exactly. What's the item that's movable?
Right.
What's the base? You can never deviate from the base because the base makes it all worthwhile. But it's the fringe stuff that we can deal with. And in this particular budget, the governor's very much against paid family leave. Okay, the House and the Senate are very much for stabilizing taxes, keeping them at the current rate. Two issues that have a dramatic effect on people. Well, we're going to have to come to an agreement here. Education, mental health, physical health, all of these things we're going to have to talk, and and make some decisions.
Pretty quick too. I mean,
Yes.
we only have a week of real discussions.
Well,
don't you?
right.
About- roughly?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. We're going to meet on Monday and talk about committees of conference, talk about how they're going to be set up. We've got to have something done by the end of the month.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. And,
And
what
it'll
happens
fly.
if you don't have that? Then
Well,
you fall into a default
Right. Well,
position, right?
the default position is a continuing resolution,
Right.
and I think that's bad for everybody.
Well, we just saw it a couple years ago.
Yes,
and it
bad
didn't
for
work.
everybody.
It didn't work at all.
I've seen 2 continuing resolutions since
Yeah.
I've been here. Benson had one, and Governor Hassan had one. Both very bad for the system. You know, there have been others. I think Governor Gallen had one at one time, but not a good thing for the system.
No, it didn't. I don't think it
No,
could.
Can't run it.
You
No.
just wasted time for those
Yeah, you're
3 or 4
right.
months. that
You're
you had.
wasting time. There isn't anybody that spends at a 1/12th level a month. It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen that way. And there are certain things that have to be done, certain moves that you have to make, and that's why a continuing resolution just doesn't work, in my opinion. It
Are you
doesn't work.
having enough support behind you?
Well,
or you
that
feel
all
like
depends.
You're the lone guy on the mountain.
Well, you got to gather the support, right? You know, and,
You have to work at
yeah,
it.
you got to work at it every day, every day. You know, and no man is an island, and you got to work to bring people on board. But if the goal is the common good,
Yeah.
we have a common purpose. And if you have a common purpose, you can all strive to make things better.
Well, I hope so. I like to see people work together.
Yes.
I think that's one of the things that either party needs to
Right?
work on.
No question about that.
and
Both parties. You know, what are parties, really? I think that's another meaningless comment.
Well, yes, but not the way people are soldiering up now.
Well,
unfortunately.
I think people, for one reason or another, take a stand and say it's a party, but it isn't.
Yeah. Senator, we had a very interesting
Thank
talk.
you. Thanks.
I hope I can get you back after
I'd
you
love to
decide
do it.
everything.
Sure,
and
love
talk
to do it.
about how it worked out for
Sure,
you, okay?
absolutely.
Very good.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure.